Hi, I'm Sekou Kaalund, and I'm the head of Advancing Black Pathways for JPMorgan Chase. Thank you for joining our career readiness series today. Landing your first job is a joyous occasion. It's validating, it's invigorating, and it's inspiring. It's the payoff for the lifetime of preparation you put into graduating college. But entering the corporate workforce after college can be a daunting experience for anyone. And this may especially hold true for young Black professionals who are finishing school. When you start your career as a young Black professional, there's a good chance you'll experience moments where you are the only one. At times, you won't be able to find corporate leaders who look like you. Learning how to fit in sometimes won't be easy. But understand this, you will eventually hit your stride, both socially and professionally. And with a little experience, you'll have no problem navigating the corporate world. If you're at the entry level in your career now, it means you're beginning at a unique time in our nation's history. Systemic racism is in the spotlight like never before, following the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. The more insidious nature of racism is in focus, as well as the recent Central Park incident. Companies everywhere, including mine, are taking a closer look at diversity and inclusion as they want to cultivate that next generation of Black corporate leaders while also growing the ranks of Black employees. In my view, this means there has never been a better time to be young, talented, and Black. And if you're willing to put in the work, I truly believe that the sky is the limit. But we want to help you get started, whether it's your first job or you're looking to make a career transition. The Advancing Black Pathways Career Readiness Series will cover a wide range of topics, including an overview of opportunities in banking and operations at JPMorgan Chase. We'll also offer you tips for launching or reinventing your career in a virtual environment. We'll cover these topics and many more. But we are the largest bank in this country, so we will also provide you with financial help and advice to help you establish solid habits early on in your career. Today's episode is about how to reinvent your career in transformative times. But before we get started, here's a short video on the work we do at Advancing Black Pathways in JPMorgan Chase.
What I always loved about Advancing Black Pathways, just the name of it, is that it was very tactical and very intentional around Black people and making sure that their pathway to financial success was clear and helping them make their way down that path.
I'm most proud of the progress that we've made and the intentionality in 2019. It really highlighted that we could make an impact by engaging our community, engaging partners, and focusing on what really matters for African Americans. Advancing Black Pathways is focused on strengthening the economic foundation of the Black community by investing in education.
The role that education plays in creating wealth in the Black community actually starts by leveling the playing field. It's going to close the racial wealth gap in America by putting students on a pathway, on careers that they would not have otherwise been exposed to.
Our goal is really to change the way African Americans live, to ensure that they are building wealth and assets.
We want to see more African Americans not only moving into the middle class, but owning homes, creating jobs, creating opportunities for people within the community. And I think this opportunity with Advancing Black Pathways will lead into that in a very positive way.
Everyone sees this as a seminal moment where we can actually move the needle to create more inclusive growth. I just feel really excited about the opportunity that's ahead of us.
In our first episode today, JPMorgan Chase Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion, Brian Lamb, has joined me for a discussion on how to reinvent your career in transformative times. So Brian, again, welcome. So obviously we celebrated the HBCU commencement last month. And so you had African-American men and women who are now embarking on their careers. What advice would you give them as Black professionals to navigate corporate spaces?
This is important, right? So this is where we're being real about, let's call it corporate America or any work environment that some of the professionals may enter as they embark on the next stage of their journey. As you enter the workforce, I think I would tell you, seek out companies and environments that are inclusive and that stand behind their commitment around diversity and representation. Seek out companies because you've earned the right to do that. Okay, you've positioned yourself to be well educated and prepared to select the very best companies and leaders that can stand behind that commitment. You may come upon a situation or an environment where you don't see a lot of people that look like you. And in some cases, they may not have come from the same background or experience. So I think a realization that is a possibility. And so to be prepared for that, right? And to have a mind frame that, look, that I may enter an environment where not everyone thinks like I do or has a background like I do or looks like I do. So how do we respond to that? How should we be thinking about how we respond to that? The second thing, once you join a firm, you think about the management team. There's an old adage that research supports that most individuals leave a company not because of the company, but because of their manager. I believe that is especially true if you think about Blacks, Black women, Black men. When there's an environment where it doesn't feel inclusive, where you don't feel like you can connect or you don't feel valued, and you believe that some of those disconnects may be because of your background, your race, your experiences. So what I tend to suggest when you see those kind of environments is think about who you can connect with in the firm, in your company, and even outside the company that can help you navigate, can help you ask the right questions, give you good perspective, right? We talked a little bit about, you'll hear my thoughts on surrounding yourself with good mentors and a personal board of directors. That's kind of how I think. They can help give you context and maybe help you react to situations that in the beginning may be uncomfortable, that ultimately will help you react in terms of how to think and approach, how to ask certain questions, how to escalate issues that might arise that feel uncomfortable. You have earned the right and deserve the right to thrive and perform at a really high level. So don't accept anything less than that. This is not the time to settle, okay, or position yourself in an environment where you don't feel welcomed. You want to be in a place where you can be the best version of yourself as a Black person. And so that means that as you move through your career, as you join organizations, you want to make sure you're taking on roles and jobs that allow you to be authentic and be your true self, right? That there's an environment, a work environment, there's policies and procedures, there's a culture, and there's an environment that allows you to thrive and excel and learn and grow.
How did your journey begin? Where did you go to school and what did you major in?
So I went to the University of South Florida, Sekou, in Tampa, Florida, and I majored in accounting. I had a minor in finance. I was passionate about learning that discipline and was excited to be able to finish.
So since we're talking about college, tell me what your favorite memory was.
When I reflect, Sekou, on my college life, there are really so many different experiences that were memorable and helped shape who I am today. But if I had to point to probably the most memorable and frankly the most impactful to me was graduating college. There were so many people involved in that process, quite frankly. Whether it was my parents, my teammates in playing college basketball that were always supportive, the counselors and the professors and faculty members that all played an instrumental role. Frankly, we celebrated together. And that milestone, quite frankly, has stuck with me through my whole life. And all of the effort that went into it was worth it. And so I reflect on that and would probably say that's the biggest.
What I like about that is we often talk about it takes a village, and what you just heard is the village that was behind you. So thanks for sharing that. But let's talk about your career today and how you came to be where you are. You have a phenomenal background. So if you could share, with our audience how you've navigated your career.
Yeah, I will tell you right up front, I think it's important to know that when I finished college, I didn't have it all figured out. And frankly, probably one of the most important things that I did was admit that right up front, right? Whether I admitted it to my family, to myself, which was probably the most relevant, I knew I had a lot to learn. And so I guess one of the principles that I would point to, or maybe even an element of my success, is just this belief that there is constant learning that will always be a part of shaping who I am, shaping the decisions that I make. And so if I reflect on the different milestones of success or the changes along my professional career, learning is a consistent part of that, listening and learning. I think another element that I point to is surrounding myself with people that had a vested interest in my success. It was mutually beneficial, right? So it kind of stepped past just the networking phase of interacting and building relationships. It was much more about a shared interest and commitment, and people wanting me to be the best version of myself and challenging me around commitments that I would make. And then the last thing I would maybe point to as an element is performance. I mean, when the day is done and you think about all of the things that you aspire to be and the aspirations you may have in your professional life or even your personal life, there's no doubt that you will ultimately have to perform, and you want to perform at an elite level to really distinguish yourself from the competition and be able to perform in such a way that it's sustainable.
Clearly, performance is always critical, but I want to double click on the mentoring and the people you surrounded yourself with. So you were an entrepreneur, you've moved around and run different functions in banking. How did you leverage those mentors in realizing it was time for you to have that new experience, or did you leverage bosses? Walk us through, because you've made some impressive moves and ran different functions. Give us some insight on how your thinking process evolved throughout your career.
Yeah, listen, I will tell you, I'll be the first to admit, I didn't always get it right with regards to leveraging some of the fantastic relationships and people that were around. As soon as I began to really understand the value of leveraging powerful relationships and mentors and advisors, I personally feel like that is when my career started to accelerate. If I reflect on that and maybe put it in context, maybe just a principle around how I think about mentors is I've always had this idea of something called a personal board of directors, right? And as you think about corporate America, there's obviously boards of directors that play a governance role and those kind of things. But that framework is maybe what I would say I tried to apply to my personal life. A board made up of individuals that cared about me, that were vested in the same goals and ambitions that I had, that were willing to hold me accountable and ask me tough questions. That same board was made up of a very diverse group of people. Some were family members, some were professors and colleagues that I met in college. Others were neighbors and friends that I met along my journey of life or were introduced to in my journey of life. And that collective board all plays a unique role. And so my ability to leverage that board, or if you will, that group of mentors, they each play a unique role. And the ability to stay connected, be vulnerable and be honest with them, and make the time to interact with them, I believe played an instrumental role in my success. And even to this day, Sekou, I have a personal board of directors and lean on them heavily for both my personal decisions sometimes and even my professional decisions.
And that's great. And I also know you are a mentor and board member for others. And so as they think about, or your mentees have talked about, choosing a new field, how do you coach people on highlighting potential transferable skills?
So, one of the things I try to think about around transferable skills, Sekou, or even the idea of moving between different careers or different jobs, there's this element of preparation, right? So try to predict and think a little bit forward around your pathway. Try to think about what the next 1, 2, maybe 3 years looks like in terms of your career progression that line up with your aspirations. And so, number one, you want to be prepared. You want to almost have a maniacal approach to preparation, right? It positions you to be able to execute when the opportunity arises. The other thing that you want to think about with regards to these career changes is research. Give some time to learning and really understanding the disciplines and the expectations and what it takes or what success looks like as you move down the path to the next career or you move into the next expanded job responsibility. I kind of think about it that way. And then maybe the last thought I would talk about around, this idea of career progression or just changing jobs. Make sure that as you kind of reflect on who you are, find this intersection. I call it the intersection or the equilibrium point of what you're really good at and what you're passionate about. And when you find that intersection, that is when you now are best positioned to excel. And so as you think about your career progression and the next moves, that's kind of, as I think through my own life, I'm constantly looking for that equilibrium point, because I believe at that point is where I can perform well, have fun, be excited about what I do and not think about it as work, and quite frankly, perform at a high level.
I like that notion of thinking about who you are, but another piece of that would be how you tell your story. What insights can you offer the audience on telling your story to match up that intersection you just described?
Well, I tell you, Sekou, as I reflect on telling your story, there probably is no more powerful asset than your personal brand. There's nothing in your arsenal. There's nothing that you will ever accumulate that I believe that will carry more weight than your personal brand. And so as you think about telling your story, there's a couple of things you want to do. You've got to protect your reputation. Okay, it is the most valuable thing when you think about today and the future. That is what's important. It will precede you. Frankly, it will tell your story for you when you have a powerful, well-regarded, credible reputation. So think about that, as I do all the time, around doing the right thing, having the right perspective, the right intent, and delivering on the commitments that you make and showing up when people need you most. The other thing about telling your story is, you'll learn more about yourself. I mean, I still continue to learn about who I am and kind of what I'm passionate about. So as you evolve as an individual, your story will evolve. So have some agility, right? It's okay for your story to move a little bit as you kind of think about your personal and your professional career journey. But have some agility around your story and be energetic and enthusiastic about, being your real, authentic self. And maybe the last thing I'll share about your story that's really important is you want your story to anchor back on what you truly believe in, what you stand for, right? Don't let someone write your story for you. You want to be your own testimony. So give some thought to how you really anchor your story back to, here's principally who I am, right? Now, I tell people all the time, I happen to work at a fantastic, the best financial institution in the world. But who I really am is a public servant. That's principally who I am. That's always who I have been, and it's who I will continue to be. And so I'm anchored in that. I'm rooted in that. And so my beliefs, my behaviors, my thinking comes back to who I am. And that's the story that I want told.
That's incredible, because too often we feel like our story has to be a story that we want other people to hear versus who we are and what's important to us. So absolutely great insights for the audience. Now, our audience is also dealing with something that has really not been encountered before, and that's this pursuit of jobs 100% virtually. And so before you get the job virtually, you have to interview virtually. So this is somewhat new for many people. What can you suggest for candidates to try to build rapport with a hiring manager on screen versus in person?
Yeah, I'm living this, Sekou, real time, right? I mean, if you think about my journey to JPMorgan Chase, which, has just been, fantastic for me and my family, it's all been remote, right? And from, spending time with, key leaders and colleagues along the journey, even to this day, as I begin to assimilate into the organization and learn and meet people and try to connect to the culture of who we are. So there's complexity to that, right? But there's also a realization that that's the environment we're in. And so what I'd have you kind of think about, and again, I'm doing this real time, so I'm learning like many of you will be. A couple, kind of elements to think about. One is everyone is feeling the uniqueness of this environment. Everyone's feeling, including those that you may or may not know really well. So what I have found is acknowledging it up front, right? Acknowledging that this is different, acknowledging that you didn't expect to have to interact or begin your relationship or your journey with an organization virtually, but you've embraced it, right? You've embraced it, you've come to understand it, and you're ready to thrive in that environment. And so that acknowledgement, I think, is the beginning of turning the corner in terms of where we are. The other item is, look, as you build rapport remotely, digitally, there's an element of that where I think being authentic and being your real self is key, right? Acknowledging that you may be, having to be in a house or be in an environment that you typically might not have a business conversation. You may not have a serious conversation. So being authentic about, look, hey, I'm in a different place right now because I'm operating out of the house, but I'm engaged. Right? Your body language demonstrates you're engaged, your tone, your temperament demonstrate you're engaged, your readiness and preparation for the conversation demonstrate you're engaged. And I think that's a lot of what people are looking for as you navigate through the process. And maybe the last thought I would just touch on as you kind of think about this is, look, have some fun, right? I mean, this is a tough time for everyone. Stress levels are probably higher than normal, quite frankly. And so there's an element to this of just enjoying the company you can keep and celebrating the little things, the milestones, and asking more about, people to learn a little bit more about who they are and their real selves and being vulnerable enough to share a little bit about your real self. And so there's these kind of things that I'd have you give some thought to as we all figure out probably what the new normal is in terms of how we interact in the future.
Take that advice. We're going to fast forward a month. So the audience has listened to you, they executed, and they got the job. So they're saying, thank you, Brian. But now they're starting the job virtually. So the job may be virtual, but their performance must still be real. So now that they've started, what would you advise new hires to really have that strong start and be deemed strong performers, even though they've never stepped foot in the office or met anyone in person?
Well, Sekou, I think you're asking probably one of the most important questions, which is this idea of being inside the firm and then how do you quickly assimilate in a different environment. So I'll just share maybe some of the things that I've done, and they may or may not apply, but I'd have you give some context to basically the framework I'm describing. The first thing I really thought of is, what is my learning agenda? Right? What's the learning agenda? Like, what am I principally trying to accomplish over this first 30 to 60 to 90 days? Write it down. You may or may not remember it, but writing it down really kind of memorializes for you, here's the learning agenda. And then as you start to build your assimilation plan and you work with the organization on where you spend your time, where you focus, that learning agenda should help drive you to what is the highest and best use of your time, so you get off to a great start, right? You just really get off to a great start. I call it a running start in terms of your career with the company. Try to prioritize inside out. That's how I thought about it. Inside out means, where am I going to spend the most of my time in the early stages of my career? That's the inside. For me, it was working with my colleagues in diversity and inclusion. It was working with my partners in human resources, the folks that I spent a lot of time with in the community and corporate responsibility. it was really understanding their roles, right? Principally getting very anchored in, so what is it that you do? And give me some ideas how it connects to the work that I will be doing. And so walking away, not only building a relationship, but frankly, walking away selfishly with the idea of role clarity, so that as you begin to interact and as you begin to work in the firm, you've got a good baseline for how things get done, what work needs to be done, and who you're likely to spend the most time with that can help you be successful.
In addition to achieving role clarity, you've also built a strong rapport with people across the firm. How did you do that?
Sekou, when I think about building rapport, principally that's kind of rooted in what I call a mutually beneficial relationship. That's just one of the key elements of it. Trust is obviously another key element. As you think about building rapport, think about how you connect in a way where people are vested in your success and that you can play a role in helping them be successful as well. And that doesn't always mean necessarily something as clear as helping them do their job or helping them be successful on a project. But maybe it's a willingness to be a sounding board, right? Maybe it's a willingness to exchange ideas. Or if they need someone to maybe step up and volunteer in a key activity, and it might not be something you do in your day job, but it's a chance to kind of stretch yourself. But building mutually beneficial relationships, I believe, are really the more concrete example of what rapport building is about. That means they're vested in trust, right? There's a level of trust there. There's this natural connectivity where we are able to see how we can support each other and help each other be successful. And there's also this willingness to stretch, just this natural willingness to do more than what may be asked of you because it's the right thing to do. And these things will start to show up. These opportunities will start to present themselves as you integrate into the company. But give some thought and have an open mind to, as you operate in a remote environment, you're wanting to be authentic and you're wanting to demonstrate that you're going to do the right thing for the firm and that you can be a trusted colleague as things move forward.
So, Brian, what makes up a professional brand? As you think about, you've alluded to this, the importance of like your reputation, but broadly, what do you consider to be a brand, and what advice would you give to new professionals about how they should work to establish it over time?
There's just so much to a personal brand that I value. I've always had a belief that at the end of the day, it is the most valuable asset that an individual can have. Some of the elements or the components, if you will, that I think are of a brand, and there's so many of them, I'll maybe throw out a few for us to think about. Number one is you are viewed by those close to you and those that don't know you as someone of integrity and of high moral character, right? I mean, that's just the table stakes of being able to have a brand and ultimately a reputation where people are going to want to be able to affiliate with you. I think your brand also should start to extend into the things that you do well, right? So that you are viewed as, someone that can deliver and perform based on whatever that skill or competency is that you've developed, whether you're an accountant like me and are good with numbers, whether you're great with marketing and creative, maybe you've been fantastic in science. Think about the disciplines, the things that you've learned to be good at. Your brand should attach to those, right? And because people will want to capitalize on that, and you instantly bring value to a relationship. And one of the other things maybe I'll just mention with regards to brand, because you want sustainability around your brand. Your brand should also extend to the people that you interact with, right? So if you're surrounding yourself with people with negative brands, I assure you at some point that will bleed into your own personal brand. So give some thought to, as you continue to advance in your career, you start to develop new relationships, who are the people that also are held in high regard and have, great credibility with regards to who they are and what they stand for, and surround yourself with those so you elevate each other's brand in terms of the company you keep.
And so for a final question, I just want to ask, what didn't I ask you? What last piece of advice or thought would you like to leave with our audience?
Well, Sekou, I'm a little disappointed because I was hoping you were going to ask me about which fraternity I was in.
Oh,
But since you didn't ask, I, feel an obligation to share. Sekou, we were laughing and joking about some of the milestones in my college life. I was fortunate enough to be a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And, Sekou, I know you might have some opinions on that.
I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi, but you have the floor now. I'll let you finish. Go ahead.
So, Sekou and I always have a great time about our memories in college and the friends that we met, and frankly, the legacies that we were able to leave. But it was just a great time. College life was a great time, and you should all celebrate the opportunity to be a part of something special in college. And you should start to think about how long-term you get a chance to give back, right? We didn't talk a lot about that, but as you advance through your career and as you move through life, you will have an opportunity to give back. And one of the first places you should think about is your alma mater. And that's something that I've always done. I feel not only necessarily a responsibility, but a sense of pride around being able to give back. Our HBCUs are so critical to society as a whole, to our corporations and businesses, and to the future generations that are to come. And so we want to see our HBCUs continue to thrive.
Amen. So thank you, Brian. Just one, for being candid and really sharing like your journey, and two, for providing such insightful tips. I couldn't take my notes, but I'll talk to you tomorrow, so I'll get it from you live. But we want to thank everyone just for tuning in. What you need to do now is register at www.jpmorganchase.com/ABP careers. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you soon.